They say you never really know the people closest to you. I used to believe that until the day my friend came to me smiling like the sun itself had chosen to shine only for him. Mark was the kind of person everyone trusted instantly. Charming, intelligent, a little mysterious, but harmless, I thought. He had a way of sliding into conversations, making everyone feel like the only person in the room. I had known him for over 5 years, and yet, in those first few hours of what would become the most unnerving experience of my life, I realized how little I truly knew him. It all started with our HOA, Homeowners Association newsletter. The neighborhood was supposed to be safe, orderly, a place where everyone knew each other. But behind the manicured lawns and polite nods, secrets festered. Complaints were quietly hushed, fees were mysteriously altered, and behind every closed door, lives were quietly unraveling. Most residents accepted it as the price of suburban life. I never paid it much attention until Mark brought it up. "Have you noticed how weird some of these inspections get?" he asked one evening, leaning against the railing of my balcony. His tone was casual, almost playful, but there was an edge to it, a spark that hinted at curiosity far deeper than mine. "I mean, I've been reading through the HOA reports and some of the inspections seem off, like someone's fishing for more than just structural problems." I laughed it off at first. "Mark, it's paperwork, people love bureaucracy, that's it." But Mark didn't laugh. He never did, really, when it came to something he was invested in. Instead, he leaned closer, lowering his voice, making me feel like I was about to hear something forbidden. "What if we could see behind it? What if we could know everything the HOA is hiding?" I should have said no, I should have walked away. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, especially when it comes packaged in the form of someone you trust. The next week, Mark showed up at my door with a binder, several fake ID badges, and a printed letter that looked official enough to fool anyone who wasn't looking closely. "I've been doing some research," he said, eyes glinting with a mix of mischief and obsession. "Turns out anyone can impersonate an HOA inspector if they have the right paperwork. We just need to follow the rules, act confident, and no one will question us." I hesitated. The thought of impersonating an official authority, of snooping through people's private lives, made my stomach churn. But Mark's enthusiasm was contagious, almost hypnotic. And so, despite the unease gnawing at me, I agreed, just this once, to join him on what he called our inspection adventure. Our first target was Mrs. Patterson, an elderly widow who lived 2 streets down. She was known for being meticulous about her garden, her house, and the faint rumors that she held secrets about the neighborhood's financial dealings. Mark's plan was simple: knock on her door, present ourselves as HOA inspectors conducting a random compliance check, and casually ask questions while subtly examining files or papers she might leave out. When we arrived, Mark's performance was flawless. He held the fake ID confidently, his smile warm but professional. I followed along nervously, hoping she wouldn't notice anything unusual. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Patterson," Mark said smoothly. "We're with the HOA routine inspection. Mind if we take a look at your records for the past year? Nothing serious, just standard verification." Mrs. Patterson's face tightened, suspicion flickering in her eyes, but Mark was prepared. "Of course," he said, noticing her hesitation. "We wouldn't want to inconvenience you, just a quick look at the files you usually keep in your study, it's routine." By the time I realized what was happening, Mark was already flipping through her papers, scanning receipts, invoices, and a ledger that recorded payments far beyond normal HOA fees. His fingers paused occasionally, marking something with a pen he had brought along. I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. This was wrong. We were intruding, invading someone's private life, yet part of me was also exhilarated. The thrill of uncovering hidden truths, of seeing what others went to great lengths to conceal, was intoxicating. And that's when Mark smiled at me, that same enigmatic smile that always made it impossible to say no. "See, it's not dangerous, just information, knowledge." After we left Mrs. Patterson's house, we spent hours in my apartment going through the documents. It wasn't just numbers and receipts, it was a map of the neighborhood's hidden dealings: secret payments, backdoor agreements, unreported renovations. And then the real shock: personal secrets, affairs, disputes, medical information. Mark had somehow managed to extract more than just compliance data. He had dug into the intimate lives of everyone in the neighborhood. "I told you," Mark said, voice low, almost reverent. "Power is knowledge. The HOA doesn't want anyone to know this, but we do now." That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had crossed a line. Mark was ecstatic, almost glowing with the rush of discovery, while I felt the weight of complicity pressing down on me. The thrill and the guilt twisted together into a single knot that made it hard to breathe. The next day, Mark suggested we expand our reach. He wanted to target the board members themselves, the people who actually decided who paid what and who could live where. According to him, if we played our cards right, we could have access to everything, the real secrets that everyone was desperate to hide. I was hesitant, but I also couldn't deny the pull. The first taste of forbidden knowledge had been too sweet, too intoxicating to resist. And so we planned, every step meticulously calculated, badges, fake letters, rehearsed scripts. We were going to infiltrate the very heart of the HOA. When the day came, I realized how dangerous this had become. We were no longer casual explorers of curiosity. We were intruders stepping into a world where exposure could destroy lives or worse, implicate us. Mark led the way, confident and composed. We approached the HOA office, a small building that looked innocent from the outside, but I knew from what we had learned that inside were files and secrets that could ruin anyone. He flashed his ID, explained the routine inspection, and I followed silently, hoping no one would question our presence. The receptionist barely glanced at us, busy with her own work. And just like that, we were inside, roaming the halls, opening drawers, accessing computers. Each file we examined revealed more: hidden financial manipulations, secret agreements, personal vendettas documented in cold, precise handwriting. I wanted to stop. Every instinct screamed at me that this was wrong, that we were crossing a moral line that couldn't be uncrossed. But Mark was unstoppable, his eyes alight with a dangerous fire. He whispered almost gleefully, "This is why I told you, friend, secrets are everything. People think they're safe. They're not." And as we left, pockets and minds filled with the unseen sins of our neighbors, I realized something horrifying. The thrill wasn't just in knowing the secrets, it was in the power that knowledge gave Mark. And I was afraid of what he might do next, once he truly understood the control it gave him over everyone in our neighborhood. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I felt a chill run down my spine. I had known Mark for years, trusted him more than anyone. But for the first time, I wondered, how much of him was real, and how much was the mask of the friend I thought I knew? Because by the time the sun rose the next morning, Mark wasn't just my friend anymore. He was something else entirely: a hunter, a manipulator, someone who saw the world in terms of secrets and leverage, and I had unknowingly stepped into his game. I didn't know it yet, but the neighborhood and my life was about to change forever. The thrill of discovery had turned into a quiet dread that sat in my chest like a stone. Mark's obsession with the HOA secrets was no longer just a game, it had become a full-blown operation. Every day he pushed further, taking risks I wasn't sure we could survive. And I was trapped in his orbit, compelled by a mix of loyalty, fear, and curiosity. It began with the board members. Mark had identified 3 of them as the most vulnerable, people whose hidden dealings could ruin them if exposed. "We don't just want the secrets," he told me, packing in my living room one evening. "We need leverage. Once we have leverage, we control the narrative. We decide who thrives and who crumbles." I swallowed hard. His words should have terrified me, but they didn't entirely. There was a part of me that was fascinated, that wanted to see how far this could go. And Mark, with that unnerving confidence, made everything seem like a brilliant strategy. Our first target was Mr. Lawson, the HOA president. He lived in a grand house at the edge of the neighborhood, surrounded by high walls and security cameras. Mark's plan was audacious. We would pose as inspectors conducting an urgent compliance review due to a new policy, gaining access to his office while he was supposedly at a board meeting. We waited until mid-morning. Mark had memorized the board's schedule, their habits, even the times their security system cycled through camera checks. I followed silently as he knocked on Lawson's door, flashing the fake badge and letter with the poise of someone who had been born for deception. "Good morning, Mr. Lawson," Mark said smoothly when Lawson appeared. "I'm Inspector Reed from the HOA Compliance Department, routine follow-up inspection. Could we quickly review some of the documents in your office?" Lawson frowned, confusion etched on his face. "I wasn't informed." Mark cut him off gently but firmly. "New policy, mandatory audit, just a short review, shouldn't take more than 15 minutes. I watched as Lawson hesitated, then reluctantly stepped aside. Mark moved inside like he owned the place, his eyes scanning everything with surgical precision. He opened drawers, shuffled papers, checked files that should have been off-limits. My stomach churned, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. And then he found it, a folder labeled private. Mark's hands trembled slightly as he opened it, revealing documents that chronicled bribes, secret payments to board members, and correspondence that exposed illegal dealings hidden behind HOA policies. This is gold," Mark whispered. His voice had that same reverent tone I had heard before, but now it was sharper, more dangerous. "With this, we hold the entire board in our hands." I felt a jolt of fear, not just for us but for the people whose lives we were about to control. Mark didn't see it as wrong, he saw it as opportunity. And I realized too late that his moral compass wasn't broken, it simply pointed somewhere entirely different from mine. Over the next few days, Mark became increasingly obsessed. We weren't just targeting one board member anymore, he wanted them all. He studied their schedules, their vulnerabilities, even their personal habits. No one was safe. And he was brilliant, methodical, persuasive, and utterly convincing in every role he played. One evening, as we reviewed our collected files, Mark leaned back in his chair, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "You know," he said softly, almost dreamily, "people think secrets make them safe, but secrets are weapons, and we are the only ones wielding them." I wanted to speak, to tell him we had gone too far, but my words caught in my throat. I was trapped, an unwilling accomplice drawn deeper into the web he was weaving. Then came the night of the confrontation with Mrs. Clark, a quiet woman who lived alone on Elm Street. Rumors had circulated that she had been secretly funneling HOA funds into private accounts for years. Mark wanted proof, and he wanted it fast. We approached her house under the guise of another routine inspection, but something felt different this time. The air was thick with tension, the kind you feel when you're about to cross a line that cannot be uncrossed. Mark knocked and Mrs. Clark answered, suspicion already written across her face. "Good evening, ma'am," Mark said, ever the professional. "I'm Inspector Reed, here for the mandatory quarterly review." Her eyes narrowed. I wasn't informed of this inspection. Mark smiled, calm and authoritative. "New HOA policy, all residents must comply, just a few questions and a quick review of your records." I watched as she hesitated, clearly unsure whether to comply. And then, in a moment that froze me, Mark stepped past her into the living room without waiting for permission. I wanted to stop him, to intervene, but my voice failed me. And that's when she turned, her face a mixture of fear and fury. "You're not who you say you are," she said sharply. Mark froze for a split second, but it was enough for me to realize she was onto us. He smiled, charming and disarming. "I assure you, ma'am, everything is perfectly legitimate, just a routine inspection." But she wasn't convinced, and that's when she reached for the phone. Mark's hand shot out subtly, blocking her line of sight. "No need," he said softly, but there was an edge to his tone that made my blood run cold. "You're safe if you cooperate." Mrs. Clark's hand shook as she lowered the phone. Her fear was palpable, almost tangible, like a living thing in the room. Mark flipped through her files, his eyes scanning for evidence, and I felt a growing sense of unease. This wasn't just information gathering anymore, this was intimidation. By the time we left, pockets heavy with documents, I was shaken. The thrill I had once felt was gone, replaced with annoying terror. Mark was no longer the friend I knew, he was a master manipulator, someone who thrived on control, someone for whom consequences didn't exist. In the following days, things began to change in the neighborhood. People started whispering, rumors spreading faster than wildfire. HOA members were nervous, private confrontations occurred behind closed doors, and suddenly it felt like everyone was walking on eggshells. And Mark, he was smiling more than ever, almost glowing with power. I started to notice how he would linger near doors, listen to conversations, and always find a way to gather more information. Every secret he uncovered made him bolder, more reckless. And I realized with growing horror that our actions were no longer harmless. Someone somewhere was going to get hurt. Then came the message that made my stomach drop, a text from an unknown number, simple but chilling. "We know what you did, stop now or it gets worse." Mark laughed when he read it. "Don't worry, friend, this is just the beginning, we're untouchable, secrets protect us now." I didn't share his confidence. My mind raced with scenarios of exposure, of legal trouble, of the personal destruction we were courting. And yet, I was still pulled along by the momentum of Mark's obsession, unable to stop, unable to resist. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I realized the truth. Mark's game was bigger than either of us. He wasn't just a friend with a curiosity for secrets. He was a predator hunting in the shadows of suburban life, and I had stepped into his trap. And the most terrifying part? There was no going back. By the time the threats arrived, I knew we were no longer just trespassing into other people's lives. We were playing with fire, and the flames were beginning to consume us. The text had shaken me more than I cared to admit. Someone had noticed our intrusions, and yet Mark, as usual, seemed exhilarated rather than scared. "We can't stop now," he said, packing the living room with an energy that was almost manic. "We're too far in, we know too much, they can't touch us." I wanted to believe him, but the gnawing sense of dread in my chest told me otherwise. Each secret we had gathered was like a spark in dry grass waiting to ignite a wildfire, and I feared that when it did, we would be trapped in the inferno we had created. Mark's obsession reached new heights as he plotted our next move. This time he targeted the HOA's most guarded files, documents stored in a digital vault only accessible with dual authentication and the board president's private approval. He wanted everything, including the hidden financial accounts, personal correspondence, and even private recordings of board meetings. "We don't just want leverage," he whispered, eyes shining with intensity. "We want control, total control." The plan was audacious. We would gain access during the monthly HOA board meeting, using a combination of fake credentials and Mark's uncanny ability to charm, intimidate, and manipulate. I watched him practice in front of the mirror, rehearsing lines that I couldn't imagine delivering without trembling. When the day arrived, tension hung in the air like a heavy fog. Mark led the way, confident and calm, while I followed like a shadow, heart hammering in my chest. The board meeting was in session, the members unaware of the intruders in their midst. Mark approached the receptionist, handed over the counterfeit ID, and delivered his rehearsed spiel about an urgent compliance audit. She hesitated, glancing at the ID, but Mark's unshakable poise and persuasive words convinced her to allow us entry. Once inside, the scene was surreal, rows of people discussing mundane HOA business while we walked past them, eyes scanning, fingers itching to access the forbidden. Mark moved like a predator in his element, sliding files out of cabinets, copying documents onto a hidden drive, scanning emails, and cross-referencing ledgers with a speed that left me dizzy. Every discovery emboldened him further. I realized with a sickening sense of inevitability that I was no longer his equal in this operation. I was just an observer, a witness to his growing power and obsession. Then, in the corner of the board president's office, Mark's gaze fixed on a small, locked drawer. "This is it," he breathed almost reverently. "Everything we need, the heart of their secrets." I wanted to stop him. I wanted to run, to tear him away before he crossed the final line. But Mark's hand was already on the lock, and within moments the drawer was open. Inside were files that chronicled bribes, blackmail schemes, and even illegal property transfers, all meticulously documented. "This," he whispered, shaking his head in disbelief, "this is power." I shivered. I had never seen him like this, so consumed, so relentless. His hunger for control was no longer subtle. It had become dangerous, frightening in its intensity. But then, the unexpected happened. A shadow fell across the doorway. One of the board members, a tall man named Reynolds, had returned unexpectedly. His eyes narrowed as he took in the scene, the open drawer, the unfamiliar faces, the way Mark was handling the files. "Who are you?" Reynolds demanded, voice sharp, eyes scanning Mark's face for answers. Mark froze for a split second, but his confidence returned almost instantly. "Inspector Reed, routine compliance review. I was just ensuring everything is up to date." Reynolds's gaze sharpened, suspicion growing. "I don't remember any scheduled inspection today." Mark's smile was smooth, practiced. "New policy, sir, random verification, very brief." But Reynolds wasn't convinced. He stepped closer, and that's when the air seemed to thicken, the tension becoming almost unbearable. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and I knew that one wrong word, one misstep could unravel everything. Then, without warning, Reynolds pulled out his phone. "I'm calling security," he said, his voice low but steady. Mark's demeanor changed instantly. Gone was the charming, confident mask. In its place was a predator calculating his next move. He stepped between Reynolds and the phone, eyes cold, voice sharp. "There's no need for that, everything here is perfectly legitimate." But Reynolds advanced, and the receptionist behind him pressed the silent alarm. In an instant, the office erupted into chaos. Security guards appeared, questions were shouted, and my stomach turned into knots. We had gone too far and the walls of deception were closing in. Mark grabbed the files, shoving them into his bag with a speed that made my head spin. "Come on," he hissed, dragging me toward the exit. We ran through the hallways, dodging security, hearts racing. The adrenaline was addictive, terrifying, and intoxicating all at once. But as we reached the parking lot, I realized something that made my blood run cold. The security gates were closing, and Reynolds and his team were already intercepting us. Mark froze for a split second, then shoved me into a car he had parked hastily nearby. "Drive!" he barked, sliding into the passenger seat. I obeyed, slamming the accelerator as he tossed the bag of files onto the floorboard. We sped through the streets, lights flashing in our rearview mirror. My hands trembled on the wheel, sweat soaking my shirt. Mark's eyes sparkled with that same dangerous thrill, and I realized I was staring at someone who had lost all sense of boundaries. By the time we reached my apartment, safe for the moment, the reality of our situation sank in. We weren't just trespassers or intruders anymore. We were fugitives in our own neighborhood, people with dangerous knowledge hunted by those we had deceived. That night, as I lay awake listening to the city hum outside, I realized the depth of the trap we had walked into. Mark wasn't going to stop, not until he had every secret, every leverage point, every piece of control he could seize. And I wasn't sure I could stop him, or if I even wanted to, though fear told me I should. And in that quiet, heavy moment, I understood the unthinkable truth. The friend I had trusted with my life had become something else entirely. Someone unrecognizable, someone dangerous. The web of lies, manipulation, and stolen secrets was tightening around all of us, and I was caught in its center, powerless to escape. The next move would decide everything: who would survive, who would be exposed, and who would pay the price for secrets that were never meant to be uncovered. The days after our narrow escape from the HOA office were some of the most tense of my life. I could no longer ignore the truth. We had crossed a line that couldn't be erased. Mark had become untouchable in his own mind, a man intoxicated with control and knowledge, and I was the silent witness to his escalating obsession. Every time I saw him, I noticed subtle changes. His confidence had morphed into something darker, something that made my stomach twist in knots. Mark didn't see us as friends anymore. To him, I was just a companion, a participant in the game he had constructed around secrets, manipulation, and power. He spent hours in my apartment sifting through files, analyzing ledgers, and connecting dots that I didn't even notice existed. Every revelation seemed to feed his ego, and I realized with growing horror that he wasn't stopping. He had no intention of stopping, until he held every secret the HOA and its residents had kept hidden for years. One night, he leaned over my desk, eyes wild with excitement, pointing to a particular folder. "This, right here, is the final piece. If we get this, we're untouchable. No one can stand against us." I glanced at the folder, heart pounding. It contained confidential contracts, private communications, and even recordings that could ruin careers and lives. The weight of it hit me like a freight train. "Mark, we can't. This is too far. People could go to jail or worse." Mark laughed softly, a sound that chilled me. "Too far, my friend, we've already crossed far beyond too far. This is about survival, about leverage, about finally being in control. Don't tell me you're scared now." I wanted to speak, to argue, but I knew I would lose. He had become unrecognizable, consumed by a need for dominance and secrecy, and I was trapped with him. The plan was audacious, almost insane. The HOA's server room, a fortified, highly secure space, held all digital records. Mark had devised a way to bypass the security protocols using credentials we had previously extracted and a small device he claimed would hack through their encryption. I didn't understand the technical details, but I knew the risk. If we were caught, it wouldn't be a simple lawsuit. It would be criminal charges, possibly prison. Despite my fear, I followed him. There was no turning back. We entered the building late at night, masks on, the corridors silent except for our footsteps. Mark's energy was electric, almost hypnotic, drawing me along like a moth to a dangerous flame. He connected the device to the server, and within minutes lines of code scrolled across the screen, unlocking files, decrypting communications, and exposing decades of hidden activity. My chest tightened as I read the summaries: illegal transfers, secret bribes, personal vendettas meticulously documented. Every resident, every board member, every secret carefully guarded for years was now exposed in front of us. "See," Mark whispered, eyes shining, This is power, absolute power. I felt sick. I wanted to leave to destroy the evidence to warn people, but Mark was already making plans to exploit it. He spoke of blackmail, coercion, and influence, of reshaping the neighborhood to his will. And the most terrifying part was his certainty. He truly believed he was untouchable. Then the unexpected happened. A faint beep from the server indicated an alert had been triggered. I froze as the security system lit up, sensors detecting unauthorized access. Mark cursed under his breath, eyes darting across the screens. "We have minutes, maybe seconds," he muttered. Suddenly, the door behind us burst open. Two guards rushed in, flashlights cutting through the darkness. I felt panic clawing at me, my body frozen in fear. Mark acted instantly, shoving me aside and lunging toward the nearest exit, files clutched in his hands. We ran, sprinting through the hallways, alarms blaring. I could hear my own heart pounding, mixed with the sound of Mark's determined, almost predatory movements. Security chased us, voices shouting, but somehow he always seemed one step ahead. We burst into the parking lot, the night air cold against our sweat-soaked skin. Mark tossed the digital drives into my hands. "Go, don't stop," he shouted. I floored the accelerator, tires squealing as we sped into the darkness. For hours, we drove, weaving through backstreets and abandoned roads, trying to avoid detection. Finally, we reached a safe house Mark had prepared, a small, remote cabin far from prying eyes. He collapsed onto the couch, triumphant, while I sank into a chair, trembling. The next days were a blur of strategy, paranoia, and unease. Mark meticulously organized the stolen files, cross-referencing every secret with potential leverage points. Meanwhile, I began to notice cracks in his armor. He was overconfident, reckless, and underestimating the inevitable consequences of our actions. Then it happened, a leak. Somehow, someone had noticed unusual activity in the HOA system. Rumors began to spread in the neighborhood, whispers of fraud, embezzlement, and unauthorized access. Board members were panicked, security was heightened, and investigators started asking questions. And Mark seemed almost thrilled. "We're finally being taken seriously," he said, eyes gleaming with excitement. "Everyone's afraid of us now, they'll come to me, they'll have to." But I could see it too. The walls were closing in. Every move we had made, every secret we had stolen was now a beacon pointing directly back to us. And I realized with a sinking heart that we couldn't hide forever. The tension escalated when Reynolds, the board member who had caught us before, appeared at the cabin one evening. He was calm, precise, and far more dangerous than I had imagined. He didn't shout or call security. Instead, he smiled, a cold, calculating smile. "I know what you've done," he said, voice low, "and I know who is responsible." Mark's face hardened, his usual charm replaced with defiance. "You have no proof," he said, though I could hear the slight tremor in his voice. Reynolds held up a small device, recordings from the office, timestamps, and digital footprints linking Mark to the breaches. "I have everything," he said, "but I'm giving you a chance. Surrender the files or face the consequences." For the first time, Mark faltered. His eyes darted to me, searching, calculating. He knew the truth. I had seen everything, been part of everything, but I had also been wary enough to not fully commit to his darkest plans. And then in a split second, he made a choice. He grabbed the drives and flung them into the fireplace, watching as the flames consumed the evidence. "If I can't have control, no one will," he whispered, a strange mix of despair and triumph in his voice. The room fell silent, broken only by the crackling fire. Reynolds stepped closer, calm and resolute. "It's over," he said. Mark turned to me, eyes wild, almost pleading. "Do you understand? This was bigger than us, you know that." I nodded, heart heavy with guilt, fear, and relief all at once. "Yes, I know." Authorities eventually arrived, alerted by Reynolds and the digital traces left behind. Mark was taken into custody, his obsession finally brought to a halt by the very people he thought he controlled. The neighborhood slowly returned to a fragile peace, though the scars of our actions remained. As for me, I walked away with a lifetime of regret, haunted by the realization that trust can be shattered in an instant, and that the person you call your friend may hide depths of darkness you never imagined. I learned the hardest truth of all: secrets are not just power, they are a trap. And once you step into that trap, it's nearly impossible to escape without paying a price. Mark had wanted control, wanted leverage, and in the end, he got caught in the web he had woven himself. But the emotional toll, the fear, and the guilt, I carried that with me, forever. Because the truth is, the damage wasn't only to others, it was to us, to the fragile bond of friendship, trust, and morality. And I knew, deep down, that nothing would ever be the same again. Sometimes, late at night, I can still hear the echo of his words, feel the weight of his gaze, and remember the thrill that started it all. And I remind myself, curiosity can kill more than just innocence, it can destroy everything you thought you knew about the people closest to you. And the most haunting realization, we are all capable of hiding darkness behind the mask of friendship. The story ends not with justice fully served, but with a reminder of human vulnerability, moral compromise, and the terrifying allure of secrets that were never meant to be uncovered.